I watched from across the street as three men surrounded her near the convenience store entrance. The pregnant woman clutched her purse against her swollen belly, backing toward the wall. The tallest one grabbed her arm. She tried to pull away. He shoved her hard. She hit the pavement with a sickening thud, landing on her side. Her cry pierced the night air. "Please, help." Nobody moved. Cars passed by. People looked away. I felt something snap inside my chest, something that had been barely holding together for months. I dropped my coffee cup and started walking toward them. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm 34 years old. I work as a mechanical engineer at a manufacturing plant on the east side of the city. I have a mortgage, a Toyota Camry, and a kitchen table where I eat dinner alone every night. 6 months ago, I had a wife named Sarah and a daughter named Emma. They were driving home from Emma's dance recital when a drunk driver ran a red light at 70 miles per hour. The impact killed them instantly. The driver walked away with minor injuries. He had 2 prior DUIs. The system gave him 8 years. He'll be out in 4 with good behavior. I attended every court hearing. I watched him smirk at his lawyer. I listened to his half-hearted apology written by someone else. The judge called it justice. I call it failure. After the funeral, I went back to work. I paid my bills. I mowed my lawn. But at night, I drove through the city and watched. I saw things I'd never noticed before. Predators everywhere. People who hurt others because they could, because nobody stopped them. The police did what they could, but they were overwhelmed, bound by rules that criminals ignored. I started carrying a baseball bat in my trunk, then a knife. Then I took a weekend trip to a gun show 3 counties over, where background checks were suggestions. I told myself I was just being prepared. I told myself I wouldn't actually use any of it. I was lying. The 3 men were focused on the woman's purse. She was still on the ground, trying to protect her stomach with both arms. The tall one kicked her in the back, not hard enough to cause serious injury, just enough to make her stop resisting. I was 20 feet away now. The shortest one noticed me first. He was maybe 19, wearing a red hoodie and expensive sneakers. He stepped toward me with his chest puffed out. "Wrong move, man. Keep walking." I didn't keep walking. I closed the distance between us in 2 steps and drove my fist into his solar plexus. He folded like paper, gasping for air. The second one, muscular with a shaved head, swung at me. I ducked under his arm and brought my elbow up into his jaw. I felt teeth crack. He stumbled backward into a parked car. The tall one let go of the purse and pulled a knife from his jacket. It was a cheap switchblade, the kind you buy at a gas station. He held it wrong, like someone who'd never actually used one. He lunged at me with terrible form. I sidestepped and grabbed his wrist, twisting hard until I heard tendons pop. The knife clattered to the pavement. I swept his legs, and he went down face first. I put my knee on his back and pressed his cheek against the concrete. "Stay down." All 3 of them were on the ground now, groaning or crying or trying to catch their breath. The whole thing had taken maybe 15 seconds. I helped the woman up. She was shaking, tears streaming down her face. "Are you hurt? Can you walk?" She nodded, one hand on her belly. "I'm okay. Thank you. Thank you so much." I asked if she wanted me to call an ambulance. She said no, she just wanted to go home. Her husband was waiting 2 blocks away. I walked her to the corner and watched until I saw her embrace a man who ran toward her from an apartment building entrance. Then I went back to where the 3 attackers were trying to pull themselves together. I took photos of their faces with my phone. I memorized every detail: the tattoo on the tall one's neck, the scar above the muscular one's eyebrow, the brand of shoes the kid in the hoodie wore. Then I walked away before anyone could call the police. I drove home with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When I got to my house, I sat in the driveway for 20 minutes. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by something else. Not regret, not exactly satisfaction either, just a cold certainty that this was who I was now. I went inside and made a file on my computer. I uploaded the photos and wrote down everything I remembered about the 3 men, where they'd been, what time it happened, how they moved, how they talked. Then I opened a map of the city and marked the location with a red pin. It was the 4th pin on that map. 3 weeks earlier, I'd stopped a carjacking in a grocery store parking lot. 2 weeks before that, I'd interrupted a home invasion in progress. A week before that, I'd followed a man who was stalking a teenage girl and made sure he understood what would happen if he didn't stop. I hadn't planned any of it. I just drove around at night, and when I saw something wrong, I couldn't make myself look away anymore. Each time I told myself it would be the last. Each time I was lying. The next morning, I went to work like normal. I sat in meetings. I reviewed technical drawings. I ate lunch in the break room and listened to my co-workers complain about traffic and politics. Nobody knew what I did at night. Nobody knew that the quiet guy in cubicle 17 spent his evenings hunting predators. I was good at separating the two lives. Too good, maybe. During my lunch break, I searched local news sites for reports about the pregnant woman. I found a brief story buried on page 4 of the city section. 3 suspects arrested after bystander intervention. The woman and her baby were fine. The 3 men had outstanding warrants. They'd been targeting pregnant women specifically because they thought they'd be easy victims. Reading that made my hands clench around my phone hard enough to crack the case. That night, I drove to the neighborhood where it happened. I parked on a side street and walked the area for 2 hours. I was looking for patterns. Most criminals were creatures of habit. They worked the same areas, hit the same types of targets, operated during the same windows of time. If these 3 had outstanding warrants but were still out on the streets, it meant they were smart enough to avoid their known addresses. It meant they had a safe house somewhere nearby. I checked abandoned buildings, cheap motels, anywhere that fit the profile. I found nothing that first night, or the second. On the third night, I spotted the kid with the red hoodie going into a rundown apartment complex 6 blocks from the original attack site. I watched the building for 3 more nights. All 3 of them were staying there, along with at least 4 other people. They came and went at odd hours. They never stayed outside for long. They were paranoid, constantly checking over their shoulders. On the 6th night, I saw them leave together around midnight, heading north on foot. I followed at a distance. They stopped at a 24-hour diner and sat in a booth near the back. I sat at the counter where I could watch them in the reflection of the window. They were planning something. The tall one kept pointing at his phone, showing the others something on the screen. They were laughing. After 40 minutes, they paid cash and left. I followed them back to the apartment building and went home. I spent the next day at work researching the building's ownership records. It was owned by a shell company that owned 14 other properties scattered across the city. All of them were low-income housing in high-crime areas. The company had multiple code violations and lawsuits pending. It was the kind of place where nobody asked questions, and the landlord never showed up in person. Perfect for people avoiding warrants. That night, I drove past the building again but didn't stop. I was starting to attract attention. A neighbor had looked at my car too long the previous night. I needed to change my approach. I started working during the day instead. I took vacation time from my job, something I hadn't done since the funeral. My supervisor seemed pleased that I was finally taking a break. If he only knew. I watched the building from different positions, different vehicles. I borrowed my neighbor's truck one day, telling him mine was in the shop. I rented a car for 3 days after that. I mapped out every entrance and exit. I noted which windows had lights at which times. I documented everyone who came and went. After 2 weeks, I had a complete picture of their operation. They weren't just mugging people. They were running a fencing operation, selling stolen goods through online marketplaces. The apartment was their warehouse and base of operations. I could have called the police with an anonymous tip. I thought about it, but I knew how it would go. They'd need to get a warrant. That would take time. By the time they moved, the apartment would be empty, and the 3 men would be gone. These weren't amateurs. They'd been doing this long enough to know when heat was coming, and even if they got arrested, they'd be back on the street within hours. The system was broken. I'd learned that lesson already. If I wanted them stopped, I had to do it myself. I started planning carefully. This wasn't like the spontaneous interventions I'd done before. This required preparation. I bought burner phones and disposable gloves. I studied the building's layout, using archived permit applications from the city database. I identified the security cameras in the area and mapped their blind spots. I timed the police patrols through the neighborhood. I learned which hours had the least foot traffic. I prepared 3 different exit routes from the area. I thought through every possible complication and prepared contingencies. Sarah used to joke that I overplanned everything, even weekend trips. She'd be horrified if she could see me now, using those same skills for this. On a Tuesday night 3 weeks after the initial incident, I made my move. I parked 8 blocks away in a shopping center lot that stayed open late. I wore dark clothes with no logos or identifying features. I'd cut my hair short and wore a baseball cap pulled low. I kept my head down to avoid any cameras I might have missed. I approached the apartment building from the north, staying in the shadows. It was 2 in the morning. The building was quiet. I'd seen the 3 targets return at midnight. They were inside now, probably asleep. I picked the lock on the back entrance, a skill I'd learned from YouTube videos over the past month. It took me 4 minutes, too long. I needed practice. The interior hallway smelled like mold and cigarettes. I took the stairs to the 3rd floor, avoiding the elevator. Their apartment was at the end of the hall, Unit 3F. I stood outside the door, listening. Television noise from inside, late-night infomercials. Someone was still awake. I knocked softly, then pressed myself against the wall beside the door. Footsteps approached. Who is it? The voice belonged to the kid in the red hoodie. I knocked again, more urgently. The door opened a crack, security chain still attached. I kicked it hard. The chain ripped from the doorframe and the door slammed inward, catching him in the face. He went down immediately, blood pouring from his broken nose. I was inside before he could scream. The apartment was smaller than I'd expected, cluttered with boxes of merchandise. The muscular one with the shaved head came out of a back room, shirtless and confused. He saw me and reached for something on a shelf. I crossed the space between us and hit him in the throat with the edge of my hand. He made a choking sound and collapsed. The tall one appeared from the same back room, more alert, already holding a gun. He fired twice. Both shots went wide, one punching through the wall behind me, the other shattering a window. He wasn't used to actually shooting people. I rushed him before he could fire again, grabbing his wrist and forcing the gun toward the ceiling. We struggled. He was stronger than I expected. We crashed into a table covered with electronics. I brought my knee up into his ribs, once, twice, 3 times. He loosened his grip on the gun. I twisted it free and threw it across the room. The kid with the broken nose was trying to get up. I pushed him back down. Stay. The muscular one was still gasping for air on the floor. The tall one was curled up, clutching his ribs. I zip-tied all 3 of them, hands behind their backs, using heavy-duty ties I'd bought at a hardware store. Then I searched the apartment. I found 2 more guns, a collection of knives, thousands of dollars in cash, and boxes full of stolen property. Laptops, phones, jewelry, cameras, designer handbags. Items taken from dozens of victims across the city. I took photos of everything. Then I used one of their phones to call the police from a spoofed number, reporting gunshots at this address. I had maybe 4 minutes before they arrived. I looked at the 3 men on the floor. They were scared now. The tall one was trying to talk, offering money, offering information on bigger criminals, anything to make this stop. I didn't want their money or their information. I wanted them to understand something. I knelt down so they could see my face clearly. Listen carefully, you're going to jail tonight. When you get out, I'll know, I'll be watching. If I ever see you hurt someone again, you won't get zip ties and a phone call, you'll disappear. Nobody will find your bodies, do you understand? They all nodded frantically. I stood up and left through the back entrance, taking the stairs 2 at a time. I heard sirens in the distance, getting closer. I was 3 blocks away when the police cars screamed past me, heading toward the apartment building. I walked calmly back to my car, removed my gloves and hat, and drove home at exactly the speed limit. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking again. But I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Purpose. I'd done something that mattered. 3 predators were off the streets. The stolen property would be returned to its owners. That pregnant woman and her baby were safer tonight because of what I'd done. The justice system would have failed her. I hadn't. Over the next 3 months, I intervened in 11 more situations. A domestic violence incident where a man was beating his girlfriend in a parking lot. A drug dealer targeting middle school kids near a playground. A group of men attempting to abduct a woman leaving a bar. A landlord threatening elderly tenants with violence if they didn't move out. 2 different armed robberies. A man stalking his ex-wife despite a restraining order. 3 cases of assault. Each time I acted quickly and disappeared before police arrived. Each time I made sure the criminals understood that someone was watching, that there were consequences beyond the broken system. I got better at it, faster, more efficient. I learned to read situations within seconds. I learned which fights I could win, and which ones required different approaches. I started carrying better equipment, a tactical flashlight that could temporarily blind someone, pepper spray for situations where I needed distance, a collapsible baton that fit in my jacket. I never carried the gun. That line felt important, even though I couldn't fully explain why. Maybe because using a gun would make me like them. Maybe because Sarah would never forgive me. Maybe because I was afraid that once I crossed that line, there'd be no coming back. The local news started reporting on a pattern of vigilante activity. They called me the Night Guardian at first, then just the Guardian. The name was stupid, but it stuck. Police spokespeople condemned vigilante justice in press conferences, warning citizens not to take the law into their own hands. But in the neighborhoods where I operated, people started leaving their porch lights on. Some left bottles of water on their stoops like offerings. One woman left a note that just said, "Thank you." I never took any of it. I wasn't doing this for gratitude or recognition. I was doing it because I couldn't stop. My co-workers started talking about the Guardian at lunch. Half of them thought it was great, someone finally doing what the police couldn't. The other half thought it was dangerous, a slippery slope toward chaos. I sat quietly and ate my sandwich, listening to them debate whether I was a hero or a criminal. If they only knew. My supervisor pulled me aside one afternoon and asked if everything was okay at home. I'd been taking a lot of time off, coming in late sometimes, looking tired. I told him I was fine, just dealing with some personal stuff. He gave me the number for the employee assistance program and suggested I talk to someone. I thanked him and threw the number away. 4 months in, I made my first serious mistake. I intervened in what I thought was a mugging near the bus station. A large man had a smaller man pressed against a wall, yelling in his face. I moved in fast, pulling the larger man away and putting him on the ground. The smaller man started screaming at me. "That's my brother. We were just arguing." The larger man was crying now, not fighting back, just confused and scared. I'd assaulted an innocent person. I apologized and left quickly, my face burning with shame. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the fear in that man's eyes. I'd become the thing I was fighting against, someone who hurt others. I decided to stop. I lasted 4 days. On the 5th day, I was driving home from work when I saw an SUV run a red light and nearly hit a woman pushing a stroller. The driver didn't stop, didn't even slow down. I followed the SUV for 6 blocks until it pulled into a luxury apartment building's parking garage. The driver got out, checking his phone, completely unconcerned with what had almost happened. I got out of my car and walked toward him. He looked up, annoyed. "Can I help you? You ran a red light back there. You almost killed a woman and her baby." He shrugged, but I didn't. "So what's your problem?" "My problem is that you don't care. My problem is that you'll do it again tomorrow, and maybe next time you won't miss." He laughed and told me to get lost. I broke his nose with a single punch. Then I took his keys and threw them into a storm drain. "Learn to drive or take the bus." He was still screaming threats when I drove away. I couldn't stop. Every time I tried, I'd see something that reminded me why I started. A news report about a victim, a criminal getting a light sentence, someone being hurt while others looked away. The monster inside me had woken up the night I saw that pregnant woman on the ground, and now it wouldn't go back to sleep. I tried to be more careful, to verify situations before acting. I made fewer mistakes. But I knew I was on borrowed time. Eventually I'd slip up. Eventually someone would identify me. Eventually the police would catch up. 6 months in, they almost did. I'd stopped a carjacking in a grocery store parking lot. The third one I'd prevented at that location. The store had upgraded their cameras since the last time. High definition, better angles. Someone posted footage online. It showed me clearly for almost 3 seconds. My face, my build, the way I moved. The video went viral. Local news picked it up, then national news. Everyone was analyzing it, trying to identify the Guardian. I watched the footage on my laptop with growing dread. I could see my face clearly. Anyone who knew me well would recognize me. I waited for the knock on my door that never came. After a week, I realized why. Nobody expected the Guardian to be someone like me. A regular guy with an office job. They were looking for someone younger, stronger, more obvious. My ordinariness was my best disguise. But I knew my luck wouldn't hold forever. I started changing my patterns. I operated in different neighborhoods now, avoiding the east side where people might recognize me. I changed my appearance frequently, grew a beard, shaved it off, wore different clothes, added glasses. I bought a different used car every few weeks, paying cash to dealers who didn't ask questions. I stopped using any digital devices while working. No phones, no smartwatches, nothing that could track my location. I became a ghost. 8 months in, I saved a kid, 14 years old, being beaten by 3 grown men in an alley behind a convenience store. I found out later he'd refused to run drugs for them. They were teaching him a lesson. I taught them a different one. The kid ran while I kept them busy. 2 of them pulled knives. I used my baton, breaking bones until they couldn't hold weapons anymore. The 3rd one ran. I let him go. I helped the kid get to the hospital, dropping him at the emergency room entrance and leaving before anyone could ask questions. 2 days later, his mother was on the news, crying, thanking the Guardian for saving her son. She said he was a good kid, just in a bad situation, and now he had a second chance. I watched that interview 3 times. That was the moment I knew I'd never stop. Not until they caught me or I died trying. Around the same time, I started noticing I was being followed. Different cars, different people, but always there. The police had set up a task force to catch me. They weren't stupid. They knew I operated in specific areas during specific hours. They were laying traps, setting up surveillance, waiting for me to appear. I stayed away for 3 weeks, letting them waste their resources. When I finally came back out, I operated in completely different areas at different times. I became unpredictable, random, impossible to trap. 10 months in, I met Sarah. Not my Sarah, not my dead wife. A different Sarah. She was being assaulted by her ex-boyfriend outside her apartment building. He was drunk and violent, destroying her car with a baseball bat because she'd started dating someone else. I stopped him the usual way. But this Sarah was different. She wasn't scared or grateful. She was angry. She told me I had no right to interfere in her life. She said she could handle it herself. She called me arrogant and dangerous. Then she called the police and tried to make me stay until they arrived. I left, confused and strangely hurt. I thought about her for days afterward. She'd been right to be angry. I had interfered without being asked. I'd assumed I knew better. I'd become exactly what I'd accused others of being, someone who imposed their will on others. That confrontation made me reevaluate everything. I started being more selective. I only intervened in situations where someone was clearly in immediate danger and unable to defend themselves. No more property crimes, no more ambiguous situations, no more assumptions. I had to see clear victimization before I acted. It meant I helped fewer people, but the people I helped truly needed it. An elderly woman being robbed at gunpoint, a disabled man being beaten at a bus stop, a homeless woman being assaulted, children in danger. That became my focus. 1 year in, the city had changed. Crime rates in my operating areas had dropped by 30%. Criminals were scared. They didn't know where I'd appear next or who I was. Some neighborhoods felt safer. People walked their dogs at night again. Parents let their teenagers take the bus after dark. The police task force gave up and disbanded. They'd never come close to catching me. The news moved on to other stories. The Guardian became urban legend, something people talked about but wasn't real news anymore. That was fine with me. I didn't need the attention. I just needed to keep working. But I was wearing down. My body hurt constantly. I'd broken 3 fingers, cracked 2 ribs, sprained both ankles, and collected dozens of cuts and bruises that never fully healed. I was sleeping 4 hours a night. I'd lost 20 pounds. My supervisor at work had stopped asking if I was okay and started suggesting strongly that I see a doctor. I went to urgent care for antibiotics when a cut got infected. The doctor asked how I'd gotten so many injuries. I told her I'd taken up boxing. She didn't believe me, but she couldn't prove otherwise. 14 months in, I stopped something that still gives me nightmares. I found a man attempting to abduct a 7-year-old girl from a park. Her mother had looked away for 30 seconds. That's all it took. I saw him grab her and start walking quickly toward a van. I ran harder than I've ever run in my life. I caught him before he reached the vehicle. What I did to him wasn't justice. It was rage, pure and absolute. I beat him unconscious and kept beating him. Someone pulled me off before I killed him. It was another parent from the park. He looked at me with understanding and fear. Go, we'll handle this. I ran. The man survived, but he'll never walk properly again. I broke things inside him that can't be fixed. I should feel guilty about that. I don't. That incident got major news coverage. The Guardian had crossed a line. The beating was too severe. People who'd supported me started questioning whether I was really a hero or just another violent criminal. The debate raged for weeks. I didn't care what they thought. That child went home to her mother. That predator would never hurt another kid. That was the only math that mattered to me. But the renewed attention meant I had to disappear completely for a while. I stopped operating for 2 months. It nearly killed me. Every night, I drove around and watched bad things happen that I couldn't stop. I hated myself for my inaction. I hated the world for needing someone like me. I hated Sarah and Emma for dying and leaving me alone in this nightmare. After 2 months, I went back out, more carefully than before. I'd learned my lesson. Control was important. Precision mattered. I couldn't let rage dictate my actions. I had to be better than the people I was fighting. Smarter, more disciplined. I started training seriously. Boxing at a gym under a fake name, jiu-jitsu at another gym in a different neighborhood, Krav Maga from private lessons with an instructor who didn't ask questions. I got stronger, faster, more technical. I learned to end fights in seconds without causing excessive damage. I learned pressure points and submission holds. I became the weapon I needed to be. 18 months in, I noticed something troubling. Other vigilantes had appeared, people inspired by me trying to do what I did. Most of them were terrible at it. They got hurt. They hurt innocent people. They made mistakes that brought police attention to all of us. One guy in the north side was beating up homeless people he thought looked suspicious. Another was targeting anyone he perceived as a drug dealer, based solely on appearance. They were making things worse, creating chaos in my name. I had to stop them the same way I stopped regular criminals. It felt wrong fighting people who thought they were helping, but they were dangers to themselves and others. After I hospitalized the third copycat vigilante, the others seemed to get the message. The Guardian worked alone. 2 years in, I'd intervened in over 200 situations. I'd stopped assaults, robberies, abductions, assaults, and worse. I'd sent dozens of criminals to the hospital and hundreds to jail. I'd made entire neighborhoods safer through fear and force. And I'd lost everything that made Marcus Webb who he was. I didn't go to work anymore. I'd been fired 6 months ago for excessive absences. I didn't pay my mortgage. The bank was foreclosing. I didn't maintain relationships. I had no friends left, no family that still called. I existed solely to hunt predators in the dark. I'd become a monster to fight monsters. Just like Batman, just like the Punisher, just like every cautionary tale about vengeance and violence. But I couldn't stop. Every time I thought about quitting, I remembered that night 2 years ago. The pregnant woman on the ground, her voice crying out for help. The way everyone looked away. I'd woken something up that night, something that had probably been sleeping inside me my whole life. Sarah and Emma's deaths had cracked me open. That woman's cry had released what was inside. There was no putting it back. This was who I was now. This was what my life meant. I'd accepted it. The police got close one more time. They'd brought in a profiler who actually understood what I was. Not a vigilante seeking glory. Not someone trying to fill a void, but someone who'd suffered a profound loss and channeled grief into action. She predicted my patterns with scary accuracy. She told them I'd suffered a recent family tragedy. She told them I had military or martial arts training, which was wrong but close enough. She told them I'd strike next in the warehouse district, where assaults on sex workers had been increasing. She was right. I walked into their trap deliberately, 8 officers waiting in strategic positions. I let them see me, then disappeared into the industrial maze I'd scouted for 3 days prior. They never came close to catching me, but they'd proven they understood me now. That made them dangerous. After that night, I changed everything again. New areas, new methods, new patterns. I became 3 different vigilantes instead of 1, each with distinct behaviors and operating procedures. It would take them years to figure out they were all me. I started traveling to other cities sometimes, helping people hundreds of miles away before returning home. I became impossible to profile, predict, or catch. I became the monster I needed to be to survive. Now 2 years and 3 months after that night outside the convenience store, I sit in a rented room in a part of the city I've never worked before. Tomorrow I'll move again. Next week, I'll be someone else entirely. The monster is fully awake now. It doesn't sleep anymore, neither do I, really. 4 hours a night if I'm lucky, usually less. My body is a map of scars and poorly healed injuries. My face is harder than it used to be, aged by violence and exhaustion. I look at old photos sometimes, pictures of Marcus Webb with his wife and daughter, and I don't recognize that man anymore. He died in the car with them. What emerged from that wreckage was something else entirely. The question I asked myself every night for the first year was whether this was justice or revenge. I've stopped asking. It doesn't matter anymore. Call it what you want. The pregnant woman's baby is 3 months old now. The kid I saved from those drug dealers graduated high school with honors. The little girl from the park just turned 8. They're alive and safe because of what I do. That's the only measurement that matters. The system failed them. I didn't. The cost is my soul, my sanity, my life. It's a price I'll pay every single day until someone stops me. I know how this ends. Eventually I'll make a mistake I can't recover from. I'll misjudge a situation or an opponent. I'll be too slow or too reckless. Someone will get lucky and I'll be the one on the ground. Or the police will finally catch up and I'll spend the rest of my life in prison. Or I'll just wear out. My body finally giving up after too much damage. I've accepted all of those endings. What I can't accept is going back to being the person who looks away, who lets bad things happen because it's not his problem, who trusts a broken system to protect people it's already failed. That person died 2 years ago. He's not coming back. Tonight I'll go out again. There's a domestic violence situation I've been monitoring for 3 days. A man beating his wife while their children hide in their rooms. The police have been called 4 times. He's been arrested twice. He keeps getting released. The wife is terrified to press charges. The children are traumatized. The system is failing them. But I won't. Tomorrow night that man will understand what happens when you hurt people weaker than you. He'll understand that someone is watching, that there are consequences, that the monster is awake and it's coming for people like him. I'll make sure he never hurts his family again. It's not justice, it's not revenge, it's just what I do now, it's all I have left. They pushed the pregnant woman to the ground and she cried out for help. A monster awoke that night. The monster is me. And I'm never going back to sleep.